Welcome to Props and Hops, powered by Dimers.com. I'm your host, Matt Landis, here for part 7 of the Bet Bash bonus series. Thrilled to be joined today by Pro Bettor Las Vegas, Cris. Cris, welcome back to Props and Hops.
Lucky number 7. Thanks. It's good to be back here, and it was very good finally meeting you for the first time. We've done 52, 53 podcasts / videos together and haven't met. So it was a pleasure to meet you last night.
Yeah, that was such a thrill to meet you and a few others at Allen Boston's screening of California Split at the D to kick off Bet Bash. That was Thursday evening. We're recording this Friday. I know people will be hearing it Sunday or maybe early the following week, but Bet Bash is going to be such a whirlwind. And to kick it off on a high note, meeting you right off the bat, couldn't ask to set the tone any better. And Cris, before we go any farther here, I know you've been on the show a few times. To your point, we've done a lot together. So if people have heard your previous Props and Hops appearances or seen the Bet US NFL show we collaborated on, they have a good feel for who we are and what you do. But for somebody who might be unacquainted or could use a refresher, could you give us a brief elevator pitch on your background as a pro bettor?
I'm a plethora of useless knowledge. No, I'm kidding. I'm basically a kind of a lone wolf type of guy. I've been betting. I moved to Vegas in 2006 and went to the School of Hard Knocks. I evolved from a square bettor way back when, and just met the right people, developed the right relationships, and fortunate enough to have some good fortune in various contests over the last 10 years, which I actually am kind of pleased about. The consistency over a decade. It's not easy to maintain, but and I've got my ups and downs as a bettor, and do okay in the NFL. I think that's probably my best, and I'm honing my UFC betting skills the last year or so, which is actually the most interesting because I was never a UFC fan, and I'm not that much of one now. And maybe that's what helps me do okay in the UFC is I don't get predispositioned in any way, and it's more of a job per se. Is trying to create ways to bet it efficiently, which is very important with UFC.
I want to make sure that we touch on UFC as well as the NFL, among other topics. But as I think about the way we wrapped up the season collaborating on the Bet US NFL show, you mentioned there being no such thing as the offseason. And it seemed maybe a bit tongue in cheek, but maybe not so much because it really has felt like this of all off seasons has been as active as ever. It really is the NFL becoming more and more a 365 day a year endeavor. So how's this offseason been treating you in terms of keeping up with everything and also where you can kind of coming up for air and enjoying maybe a change of pace post Super Bowl?
I used to take 100 to 120 days off a year. Since 2005, I go to Asia and just take all my days off in a row because there are no days off when you're sports betting, as far as I'm concerned. So, but obviously with the pandemic, I've been here and everything has changed and evolved for me. And, we're doing some videos on my YouTube channel, some weekly videos with my friends, Ron and Ted. And the slogan is it's a lot it's easier to keep up with the NFL than catch up on the NFL. And there's no truer word spoken, quite frankly. I firmly believe that this offseason so far is more interesting than, a handful of regular season weeks of the NFL. So that's what I kind of like about it. And I remember coming back from these summer vacations and having to play catch up, and it was kind of overwhelming. And I'm just really looking forward to just being right on the ball as things go along, and there isn't going to be any catch up. So I think that that's going to be important for improved results next year.
I think the way you've outlined that approach really indicates the mark of a pro and something that a lot of Bet Bash attendees probably wish they could pick your brain about at some of these sessions over the course of the event. But to be clear, you're, I guess, let's call it an honorary Bet Bash attendee, not formally attending all the sessions. But again, you were at the California Split screening hosted by Allen Boston to kick things off. And I was wondering if we could get your thoughts. We'll dig into the Bet Bash event a bit since you're a pro bettor here in Vegas. It is affecting you in some way. But what were your thoughts on the screening and the Q&A to get things rolling last night?
I actually had another obligation to go to before, which was quite interesting. A lot of industry people. So I didn't actually watch the movie with everybody, but I showed up just as the Q&A was starting. And it was interesting. I mean, it's an interesting movie. I watched it for the first time. Somehow I had missed it. Being the movie buff I am, I've watched just about everything at some point, but that slipped through the cracks. And it was an interesting movie. And I had always wanted to meet Alan Boston. I think he's a very interesting guy. He's a lot like me in some respects, where there's a lot of mental stuff going on in his head. And I ran into Rufus last night, and it was a pleasure to meet him. And I really respect the way Rufus has been tweeting out the mental aspects of betting and the importance of having your head on your shoulders and properly reconcile what the hell's going on in your head properly. So anybody that really talks like that about the mental aspects of betting, I really appreciate, and I really tune in. So it was a pleasure to meet Alan last night and just see him in action. And I don't know whether you noticed, but Heidi Fleiss was one of the two women with him last night.
One of the two. We'll leave it at that for this conversation. But a tip for anybody as you talk about, kind of rubbing elbows with Rufus Peabody and meeting Alan. Anybody who's in Vegas and doesn't have a ticket to Bet Bash, that's not necessarily a problem if you want to participate in some way. If you're a casual bettor or just want to, get something out of the event, people can check out betbash.co for a schedule of meetups happening between sessions. This episode's coming out Sunday morning. So Sunday afternoon, Monday afternoon, there will be opportunities for non-ticket holders to meet some of these people and still get some great insight without having to pay a dime for it if they're not in a position to do so. So I think that's a valuable point that you touched on there. And also, as you outline, the pleasure you took in meeting some of these people last night, I got the sense initially that you were pretty skeptical about an event like Bet Bash, and wonder if your experience last night or things you've picked up on more recently have been turning that skepticism around in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly, I kind of scoffed at it a little bit. I ran into Spanky last night, and I patted him on the back, and I said, "Hey, I give you credit. You've really the marriage with Circa and the effort that these guys have made. I think this event is going to be, pretty darn interesting." And I mentioned to him that I'm, quite impressed by how it's developing, and it just seems to have the foundation to be something that's going to build and last for years to come. And there's just so many people that DM me or that I talk to that are disappointed that they didn't take advantage of being here. And I'm sure if it comes back here or in the East Coast, they're going to reconsider. So there's a lot of people that will that aren't here that will come to future events. So I look for this to be a continuing process. It's very well done.
And perhaps the most beneficial thing, there are a lot of sessions and expert panels taking place, but I think a lot of people, regardless of where they are in the betting spectrum, can learn a lot when it comes to the hidden value of networking in person. And that seems to be right up your alley. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
It's really funny too, because I actually have a friend that's trying to break into the industry, and I'm making an introduction that's quite valuable for him today, so that he may be able to break in the industry. And one of the comments that I made to him was, throughout the years, you meet a lot of people, and what you should do with people is get to know people and not have any expectations and let things just happen naturally. Don't try to force things. And throughout the years, I've been pleasantly surprised at how many relationships, down the line, just somehow, via osmosis or whatever, they mean something somewhere down the road. Even if they, either both parties aren't doing something for each other, they still have value in developing friendships. And maybe they don't make you money, but they they expand your knowledge base, and they may introduce you to other people. And it's just important to know as many people in this industry as possible, because realistically, it's all about information. The sports books have all the information that you have. And if you think you have something or some sort of an edge, that's going to last for about 2 minutes. So where you really have the edge is on information. Who's going to be moving the numbers, getting a few minutes lead on injuries and such, and strategies, discussions, and just the whole evolution of your learning curve is important to know as many people as possible.
I think of the bases you're covering right now with the Major League Baseball regular season win total market, or even now the NFL regular season win total market, in addition to UFC you touched on off the top of this conversation. It's almost impossible for any one person to master each of those areas on their own. So really the power of networking, I think, plays out in the way that you can get down in advantageous ways across so many different options on the betting board. So if we just go one by one with a few different areas in that realm, I would like to talk to you a little bit about Major League Baseball season wins. I know right before we recorded in the video stream that you and I can see, you held up a little green sheet with everything that you're tracking. So what goes on behind the scenes with your process as the Major League Baseball regular season win total market opens up? And are there any angles that you think bettors looking to get in play would be wise to consider at this time of year?
I personally do not recommend. I don't like to tie up money per se long term. I don't necessarily recommend that to other people. I certainly don't recommend betting in credit shops for futures or anything long term, because you may not get paid. You just don't know. It's just too long of a window. I'm in a personal situation where I've got money sitting dead, in a lot of locations, and you can't put it in the bank and make any money, and there's nothing to invest in. So I'm able to use these shops. The money's sitting there anyway, so I'm doing a lot of season win futures, and you're finding a lot of differences of value where you can play both sides, or where a line's going to move, and you can just take an advanced position, and you're going to buy back later on. And so baseball season wins, I'm always middling those. If I can get 2-3 points or 2 to 3 wins difference, that's what I'm looking for. And it's worth my time, because, you can hedge out at the end if you get close. But at least it's doing something. At least it's taking a shot on the stuff. But I'm tracking, 9 or 10 books. I'll check each of them out each day. I'll see where they shift out, and see if there's any more opportunities to play something.
Sounds like a bit more of a top-down approach, as Spanky would phrase it, where you're picking off discrepancies between books versus doing too much of the heavy lifting, handicapping on your own. And I think that can be just a really efficient way to get in play on a market like this. I'm wondering with NFL regular season win totals, if it's a similar concept. I know that when we talk NFL and have Las Vegas Cris on the line, I've got to note that it's so cool that Roxy Roxborough singled you out as perhaps the one exception to his rule that nobody beats the NFL. I know sides and totals can be a different market, but still that is very high praise from a very credible source. So piggybacking on your MLB regular season win total advice, anything similar or perhaps a bit different looking at the same market in the NFL?
Well, that was this. When somebody like that makes a comment like that, your life goes downhill from there. So that was the peak, but that was very kind of him to say. But I think what I didn't mention, what I clarified was, people don't want to put up the cash at the brick and mortar places for 7 or 8 months, and I don't blame them. And that's why you're finding huge discrepancies. It seems like the laziest market you could possibly imagine, with the huge differences, and for good reason. Who the hell wants to put that money up? It's not worth your time. You can churn that money over and over again. But as you already know, I was never really a fan of taking preseason positions on NFL, because I don't want it to convolute, so to speak, whatever I'm doing mid-season. Baseball, I don't handicap myself, so I don't care about that. I'm completely indifferent. I've got 6, 7 different positions, and I'm happy to have them, but I didn't do the handicapping. People that I trusted the handicapping. When it comes to NFL this season, I'm probably going to have some season wins I picked out, we knew Washington wasn't going to fare well last year. We knew the Lions weren't going to fare well last year. So I'm hoping that we pick out some gems this year, and I might take a handful of them.
When it comes to a market that doesn't require fronting money and sitting on it for months, the UFC, something that you're really putting a lot of time into and growing your expertise when it comes to mixed martial arts these days. How would you describe your approach to betting the UFC, and maybe any advice that up-and-coming bettors looking to learn the sport from a betting standpoint could benefit from?
I bust my ass in the NFL, and I think I might be working harder in the UFC. And I think it's the last inefficient market that's left. All these other markets are efficient. They're very tough to beat. The UFC is something different because it just feels, it has that feel every single week of it being the Wild West. And these lines move a hell of a lot. I mean, I mean, in 2 hours, you can just have 40, 50% moves. And it's just, the moves are just something you would never see in any of the other sports. So what's really important to me that I'm doing differently is I don't want to, I'll play the favorites, but I'm going to use them in different ways. I find creative ways to bet each fight. And it's not easy. It's very time consuming. And I know UFC, kind of is a turnoff to people. I'm telling you right now, I could give a crap about UFC. I didn't care a year ago, but there's money to be made, and it's growing, and it's interesting. And the margins that you can find, the differences between shop to shop to shop in value is just extraordinary. Huge differences. But what I try to do is I want as many plus money transactions as possible. So, coming into this week, I've been around 225 wagers this year over, 9 weeks. So I'm averaging about 25 bets. The average price of what I'm doing is plus 151. Only 25% of what I do is a favorite position where I'm laying a price. So 75% of my stuff is plus money. It's very important. And one of the creative ways that I do, which I don't know why people don't do this more often, is I'll multi-purpose parlays where I feel that there's a ton of value betting an event that starts early and using it as a parlay. And that's the money you were going to put on that fighter anyway, or any event. It can apply to any sport. You're good. You have X amount of money you want to invest in event number one. And if event number one goes your way, then you don't have to do anything. You've got the back end parlayed, and you have an exponential added value on that back end. So you have a lower risk on that back end item. And if the first event, crashes and burns, you've got time to go ahead and still bet that second event. No harm, no foul. You were going to lose that money on the first event anyway. So you might as well put your money to work. And so I do a lot of layering between timed events that have different starting times that allow me to change my positions and act accordingly. So sometimes it really reduces my risk for the later events, and then sometimes I have to scramble if the front end's lost. But my ROI right now, I haven't computed last week, but 225 bets is 14% coming into last week. So it's a pretty solid number. I'm doing my work.
There's so much that we could unpack there. One area I'd like to follow up, you mentioned ROI, and earlier on you mentioned betting a lot of plus money. And I think a lot of bettors look at win percentage with different bets. If somebody in the NFL, we know if you're laying minus 110 and you're hitting 53% or better, you're profitable. But that break-even percentage can change based on the VIG involved in every bet you're making. So if you're laying minus 1,000 and you're hitting 55%, something's going terribly wrong. If you're betting a lot of underdogs and you're anywhere near 50%, you're doing quite well. So could you speak to the difference between, let's call it strike rate, just pure percentage of wins and losses for total bets made, versus ROI? A lot of times you might be wise to make a bet that you expect to lose just because the odds say you might not be losing it, as often as one might think.
This has become. I'm fascinated. You actually touched on this subject without me prodding you. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. Is when you hear people talking about their win loss or their profit. It doesn't. It's freaking meaningless almost. I don't care what your win loss is. My win loss in UFC is 43%. 43%. My ROI is 14% coming into last week, and my average unit size has been 0.76 of 1%, and I was plus 26% for the year, and I'm only winning 43% of the time. But so if you go by win loss, I'm a big huge loser at 43%. So that doesn't tell you anything. It's really important if people are going to follow people, which a lot of people, I follow people. So everybody follows people. Everybody has help. It's important to understand how people are making their money. If somebody just tells you that their win loss is this, that doesn't tell you enough. And if people tell you, well, I've made this much profit, well, what happens if their profit was at a 2% ROI? What happens if it takes them $30,000 of bets to make the same amount that it takes you $10,000 to make that amount? That's a huge difference. And there's a huge space. I would say 95% of the bettors do not even know what ROI is. And it's extremely important for a sport like UFC, but it's also extremely important for every sport is how much do you risk to make the profit? When people tell you they make profit, it doesn't tell you enough. How much did you have to lay out to make that profit?
Man, I feel like after these last, 5 or 10 minutes, once we got into UFC up to this point, if Spanky hears this and isn't begging you to be on a panel at the next Bet Bash, should Bet Bash return to Vegas, then there's a missed opportunity. I hope that some of the Bet Bash audience who won't see you at some of the sessions can still benefit from the knowledge you're sharing here. It's clear that there's a lot of depth and breadth to your betting approach. And I'm wondering what you might think of as your superpower, for lack of a better term, of all the things required to do what you do. What do you think it is that you do best as a pro bettor?
I think what I do best is try to remove ego as much as possible, understanding that that I'm not the smartest guy in the room at any time, and be willing to always have an open mind and learning more, because you're never going to keep up on everything that you need to know. It's a constant learning process. You know what? I had a thought. This is really interesting. And it dawned on me because, from our previous podcast, I love to listen to as many podcasts as possible from every range. I'll listen to the snobs, I'll listen to the morons, I'll listen to everybody and it dawned on me as I'm listening to a podcast this week of somebody that just got into the business, less than a year of experience, and it was a female. And I'm sitting there going, I'm thinking to myself, who the hell would want to listen to this person? In reality, what are you going to really learn from somebody that is openly saying, oh, I just started betting and this, that, and the other. And as I'm listening, I'm realizing how refreshing it is, because when you listen to people that are just getting involved in it again, or for the first time, they're coming in at all these different angles that you may or may not have considered, or maybe completely fresh and not in your wheelhouse of thinking. And I just thought it was good for the thought process to have that fresh kind of perspective, because people that are new to this have so much, much higher passion, much higher energy. They're not jaded. So they're so optimistic, and they are absolutely on point to gather as much information as possible. And what's really funny is with Twitter and all the resources for information, they're picking off tidbits that are completely out of your wheelhouse, that if you're listening to these people, hey, wait, let's go ahead and check that out. And you realize, oh my gosh, there's this whole, wealth of knowledge in this area or from this angle. And it can be quite refreshing, frankly. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think something that could be refreshing for other bettors on the other end, looking up to a pro bettor such as yourself, could be knowing that just because you're a pro, I know we don't have video for the audience for this conversation, but people who have seen previous clips or seen you elsewhere, you've got two of the oversized checks behind you from your contest success over the years. that doesn't mean that you're perfect at what you do. And I think that can be so refreshing for people to understand that if it's okay, I can cut this out if you would prefer it. But you recently had an experience where you bet 10 times more than you meant to on a tennis play. And you had a bunch of lost tickets that had won, and you're unable to cash them in if you can't find them. Like, this happens even at the pro level when you've got a lot going on. We're all human. So I think that can be refreshing to everybody. Would you mind elaborating a bit on, even though you're so successful in so many ways, you're still human and very imperfect at the same time?
I don't know anybody that doesn't make mistakes. They may not talk about them, or they may just talk about them privately, but the dumb crap I do every now and then, it just never goes away. You're never going to be perfect. But yeah, I mean, this is a valuable lesson. Last year, I made about $30,000 in live bets with tickets, and I lost the freaking tickets. I still haven't found them. And so the season ended. I spent days searching my whole house, have no idea where they went to, but I still got them all cashed. And the reason I got them cashed is because I'm using my player's card. Very important to use your to be tracked. I also had the history of my communications with my wife, who bought the tickets. I knew the exact dates and times and what I was betting. So I was able to go to these casinos and say, hey, I bet this, this, and that at this time and date. And I got paid on all of these. So important lesson to everybody: use your player cards, track as much as possible, take photocopies or Xeroxes of everything that you have. But yeah, and the other thing is dumb. I don't know what the hell happened, but I was betting tennis and somehow an extra zero popped up. And I didn't even realize it till the event was over, but I bet 10 times more than I wanted to on a tennis match. And I'd never done something that bad. It was ridiculous. So anything can happen. And fortunately, I didn't tell you, I actually won it.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. Hopefully that doesn't just destroy the longevity with that account in that case.
No, it never goes that way. Every time you make a mistake, you always lose. And I finally won one.
All right, there you go. Well, I'll note that a lot of people listening to this will probably never Xerox one of their betting tickets moving forward, but I do like the idea of taking pictures, having documentation that should you lose a physical ticket, having some recourse, to your point, can make all the difference. And Cris, you've outlined so much over the course of this conversation, some at a very high level from what you do, some of it very relatable for anybody, even if they're just starting out. If you're to put yourself in the shoes of, let's say, an up-and-coming bettor listening to this conversation, what would you say might be one or two of the most important skills in betting for somebody to focus on from that position?
Information gathering and networking is by far, the most important. I mean, the boring money management type stuff. I mean, everybody knows they need to manage their money properly and have as many. I mean, I guess the one thing people are stubborn about is, if you're going to take it seriously, you have to have every place funded. Every place, you have to have access to as many lines as possible. Every half point, every nickel, every dime matters. It allows you to lose at a much slower rate, since most people do lose. And it's just important to do network and get information.
That reminds me of something that everybody can relate to, and I think everybody does some version of this when they travel. I tweeted about it yesterday when I landed at McCarran Airport. I guess it's Harry Reid International Airport now, but looking for a ride to get downtown to the D where I'm staying for Bet Bash. Uber versus Lyft. Uber would have taken a few minutes longer to pick me up, and it would have been $3 more expensive. Guess what? I took a Lyft. No questions asked. From a betting standpoint, those same options exist. I know Rob Pizzola uses the example. If you're at the grocery store and looking at the same shelf, the same bag of chips, one of them is $3, one of them is $2. Which one are you going to buy? From a line shopping standpoint, we have so many of those options, and it's, for some reason, if it's shopping at the store or, shopping the rideshare apps, everybody kind of does it. And a lot of people who do those same things will bet into one book. And it doesn't take a lot more effort to shop around. And if people want to, again, circling back to your points about ROI making, a bigger difference in the long term than one loss percentage, if you want to maximize your ROI, yeah, a little line shopping can go a really long way.
Yeah, and I think people can get way too carried away with this type of stuff. I think 99% of people just want to like be reasonably on the ball, so to speak, and not anally track every single dime and have to have every single edge. Uh, and I understand that because this is supposed to be fun. And if you're planning on doing it for a living, good luck. It's very intrusive in everyday life, and it weighs on the psyche over time. But for the regular person, have fun with this first and foremost, but just don't foolishly give money away. Is important. Just know where you can lose at a slower rate, or win more when you do win, and it's just so important. People ignore it.
Yeah, well said. I like the reframing of still keeping it fun. It doesn't mean track every book in existence, but instead of just one, if you can get three and do something, oftentimes 3 to 5 can be the magic number. It doesn't take dozens and dozens of outs like some pro bettors have. Just a couple in the arsenal can make a big difference and still keep it fun without making it too burdensome of an effort at the same time. Cris, I've got one more question from you, pivoting from sports a little bit, weaving in the Malinsky Minute. In addition to David Malinsky's legendary sports knowledge, local restaurants, mom and pop independently owned spots were just one of his biggest passion points. I think that, Mount Charleston and Lotus of Siam were the reasons he lived in Vegas more so than betting. And beyond a Lotus of Siam, I know you're well familiar with them as well. I was wondering if you could give us, let's call it Las Vegas Chris's Las Vegas restaurant recommendations.
Yeah, I think it's important to get off the strip if you can. If you're visiting Las Vegas, it has become painfully expensive, and it just feels like they have their hands in your pockets as they're sitting you down. Frankly, but looking for places that have character, there's a place that's on Sahara and near Eastern called the Italian American Club. And as a friend of mine once said, he's never seen so many fathers with their daughters, so to speak. But it's one of those old style places where you've got the little band going, and you've got the kind of a Goomba crowd a little bit, and it's a really interesting place with a good Italian food that's been there since 1966, standalone building, and the reasonable prices. It's one of those little character type places to go to, that kind of sticks out that nobody would think of, so to speak. If you don't want to break the bank and you go downtown, Andiamo's, I think, is the best all around value with food quality, and that's at the D. Excellent food, never had a bad meal there, and they're not breaking the bank there. I really like that, if you're looking for steak and such. Pizza Rock is pretty good. Try to get some Detroit pizza. They've got some good Detroit pizza there. If you like a buffet, you have to go to Bacchanal. That's at Caesar's Palace. I heard bad news that they may have raised the price again, and but it's at least $75. But they have 7 different solid food stations of different types of food, and it's worth for how much you have to spend to go elsewhere. That may sound ridiculous for a buffet. You're saving money going, versus going to a regular restaurant, and you've got a great selection of food there. In fact, it was so good that they was cannibalizing the other restaurants. They've had to keep raising the prices because the lines were just ridiculous. I think a couple of Thanksgivings ago, I tweeted out a sign, and it had a real long line of people behind the line that said the waiting time from here is 3.5 hours. So it's a very popular destination.
That reminds me of being in Southern California. Whenever Disneyland raises its prices, everybody seems to lose their mind. And yet there's still a 2-hour wait every Saturday for Space Mountain. So in one sense, yeah, it's painful when prices go up, but the law of supply and demand, if there's that much demand, then you could argue the prices might not be high enough. Cris, it's clear that whether people want to bet well or eat well, you've got them covered in Vegas. So I want to make sure to plug your work so people know where to find you if they're not following you already. On Twitter at Las Vegas Cris. You've also got a good YouTube channel going. I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. Anything I'm missing or anything else you'd like to add?
No, not really. I'm just plugging along, and I try to have useful or funny tweets, and I don't tweet a lot, but I just try to be different and try to have fun. I'm an old fart. I'm not trying to build a brand or anything. I'm not trying to I'm just trying to be me and trying to have fun and just rolling with the punches.
Yeah, the authenticity really shines through, and thank you from me and everybody else who benefits from the wisdom and sometimes just the pure entertainment from everything that you share. I want to take a moment to let everybody know that that's going to do it for this episode of the Bet Bash bonus series here on Props and Hops, powered by Dimers.com. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I'd recommend checking out the Dimers Podcast Network at dimers.com/podcasts for more gambling content. Tomorrow, the series goes on, but Cris, for now, thanks once again for your time and insight. It was great to meet you in person last night, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon for lunch today.
Spicy Thai food.